Welcome to Halting Toward Zion, the podcast where we limp like Jacob to the promised land and talk about life, the universe, and everything along the way. I'm Emily Maxon, here with Greg Ettinger and Rachel Wojtek, and we have been walking through the ministry of our Lord Jesus Christ, and we have approached the Garden of Gethsemane. I don't think we've quite gotten into the garden, perhaps, or maybe to the garden, but not into the garden. Anyway,
well,
that's
we
where
did
we are
have
today.
Mark flee the garden with, with nothing on, but we skipped
Poor
the
John Mark.
And we did. I think we did start talking some about the Lord's his praying for the cup to pass.
Yes, because we did talk about the high priestly prayer last time.
Well, this is his prayer to his Father for himself, and I suppose that's where we pick up.
Yeah.
He, yes, they got to Gethsemane. I think we did this part. Gethsemane means oil press, appropriate figure for what's going to happen here. Our Lord is going to be pressed with beyond measure, and the fruit of his sufferings will be the work of the Holy Spirit in us eventually, but the cross lies beyond. He drops most of the disciples in some place near the gate, and he goes on a little further and leaves Mark and Luke, James, John, and Peter, his three wingmen, and tells them to pray, not for him, but for themselves as they enter into temptation. And then he goes a stone's throw further on, falls on his knees, and begins to pray to his Father. As Matthew records it, he says this: "Oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt." This is one of the key passages in helping us to see our Lord's true humanity. Here, he looks at what he believes he understands of the Father's will. Now, as God, he knows everything. As God, he decreed the end from the beginning. He knows exactly where this is leading. But in his humanity, he is not omniscient, and there are things that are hid from him. For instance, in the Olivet Discourse, as recorded in Mark, he says he didn't know the time of his own second coming. And so as he looks at the cross, he's asking, have I missed something? Is there another way? It's easy to look at this and to think, well, he's afraid of dying. That's kind of wimpy. A lot of people have died. Yes, a lot of people have gone to certain death out of love of family or friends, religion, country. None of this is what Jesus is thinking about. He has always loved and been loved by his Father, and he knows that if he goes to the cross, that fellowship is going to be broken, that in his human nature, he will be cut off from the Father, from all the comfort and resources of the Spirit, and he will not only be alone, it will be God's own wrath that will make his soul a sacrifice for sin. This is something that no human being has ever been asked to face, except Jesus himself. And so it is not surprising that he asks, have I missed something? Is there another way? Not that I don't want to do whatever you want. He's very clear about that. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. So we have here proof, evidence of his own human will, which comes to terms with the Father's will, not because there's conflict, but because there's ignorance. Did I miss something? Have I not understood the prophecies correctly? Is there something wrong here that I've missed? And there is no voice from heaven. There is no audible answer. We're told in Luke's gospel this: and there appeared an angel unto him from heaven, strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Whether or not the blood vessels in his face were actually breaking and producing blood, or whether the sweat was just so heavy it looked like blood, We're not told, nor does it matter a great deal. It was intense agony. The writer of Hebrews talks about this incident. This is Hebrews 5, and it says of Jesus, who in the days of his flesh, when he'd offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience. It's one thing to obey when everything's nice and cushy and there's puppy dogs and rainbows and ice cream sodas. It's something else when you're going to go through hell. And Jesus had to face this, and he did. It cost him greatly. The suffering just in the garden, the struggle in prayer was intense, but at no point did he turn away from his Father's will. When he rises from that, he comes back to his disciples, and they're asleep. He wakes them up. And he says to Peter, what, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you enter not into temptation. The ye or the you is plural. Pray for yourselves, each of you, and pray for one another, and pray for the others out of the gate. Your souls are in danger here as well.
I wanted to insert something on the end of the previous verse, verse 41, that I noted from when David was preaching through Mark, that spirit in that verse actually should be capitalized, that it's not our spirit, but rather the Holy Spirit is ready and able to assist us in the hour of need, but it is our flesh as one of our enemies that is weak, and that think of Romans 7, Romans 8, the spirit versus the flesh. And so it's not just we want to, but we can't, or we won't, but rather the Lord is always ready and able to help us, which is an affirmation here for Christ, that even now he has the Spirit empowering him as the anointed one.
Yes. And so he continues. He's not done praying. He goes away the second time, and his words are a little different. Oh, my Father, if this cup may not pass away from me, except I drink of it, thy will be done. And the content's the same, but the phrasing's different. There's more of an acceptance of, and if this cup is, and of course it's talking about his sufferings, it's talking about the cross. If I have to drink this to the dregs and there's no other way, then your will be done. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words. So apparently no progress beyond that. He's still wrestling. But when he comes forth, he is victorious. He has his will. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience. The Father saved him from dying there so that he could die a little later. He comes to his disciples and says, sleep on now and take your rest. Apparently, he's actually saying, fine, sleep. I'll stand guard. But no sooner does he say this than he hears the noise of a crowd approaching. Yeah.
Before we go on, can I get your feedback on a plausible interpretation? I remember thinking of this when I heard a sermon not too long ago from Mark on the Garden of Gethsemane, and specifically the point of Jesus asking his disciples to watch. And I remember a considerable part of the sermon was spent on what is he asking them to watch for? And the pastor did a great job presenting different interpretations and presenting what he thought was the best. But he didn't address one that seemed pretty apparent to me looking at the text. And so I don't know if nobody has said it because it's insane and wrong, or if just nobody's said it yet. There's a way out for Jesus. The Romans can't kill him if he's already dead. This sounded to me like him asking his friends to be on suicide watch for him. Which, I mean, if that is a viable interpretation, I think that's a great encouragement to those who have been in that frame of mind of like, this is an option on the table. and knowing that the Lord did experience that temptation along with all the other temptations that we encounter as sinful humans. But again, it seemed like to spring from the text as I was reading it, but I didn't hear anybody else saying anything like that.
What did the pastor give as his preferred interpretation?
I wish I could remember. Again, I was just kind of not aghast, because that's too strong a word, but I was just surprised that it just seemed really surface level to me. That my thoughts were not mentioned, and of course my thoughts are the most important, I think that it might have been that he was asking them to watch for the approaching soldiers or something.
Overall context, Jesus does know the soldiers are coming. His whole thing has been to control the timing of that. His emphasis to them is pray. After he says watch, he says pray that you enter not into temptation. There doesn't seem to be any concern. He is not concerned that they be concerned about him. They've been told he's going to die. They don't know what's going on here. He knows. They're just probably caught up. He's probably assuming the mood, my soul is exceeding sorrowful unto death, that. So there may be that depression and that tiredness. We're past midnight now. You've been up all day. There's been a lot of stuff has happened. Our master seems depressed. He's sad. And he tells us to pray for ourselves and to watch for one another, for the guards that are coming, to be alert and awake, to be on guard. This is one of the defining moments in human history and in God's relationship with man. I would be slow to say that Jesus is contemplating suicide or that he wants them to consider that as a possibility. Is there a way out? Yeah. I pray the Father, he sends me 12 legions of angels. But that's not how shall the scriptures then be fulfilled? If there's his own prayers do not seem to be, take me now, take me without losing contact with you. It seems simply to be, have I got it right? Is this your will? Is this the road? And each time he prays, he comes better to terms with it. And as we'll see as we go a little bit further. So that's my response insofar as I have one. He is interrupted. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. Behold, he is at hand that doth betray me. And while he yet spoke, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with him a great multitude with swords and staves from the chief priests and the elders of the people. And he that betrayed him gave him a sign, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, the same is he, hold him fast. Forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said, Friend, wherefore art thou come? And one of the other gospels says, Judas betrays thou the Son of Man with a kiss. And then other things happen, but a couple remarks just in passing here. One's kind of personal. Rise, let us be going. This is not the first time this has been said in Scripture. Trivia hour. Either of you recognize the first time it was said?
Was it at the end of Judges?
Yes.
Ugh, don't like that.
Because there, the Levite abandons his bride. He's ready to leave the violence and the danger and looks down at her. She's fallen at the threshold of the house he's staying in and simply says, Rise, let us be going, without offering none of this, dear, are you all right? It's just, come on, let's go.
Without noticing that she has been raped to death.
Yes.
On that occasion. She is dead.
Yeah. I have used that expression a few times, and eventually my wife caught where it was from and didn't like that I was using it.
Please
And I
don't.
can understand why. But then one or both of us came and said, well, but wait, look. These are the very words that Jesus uses. He takes that and turns it inside out and upside down. He's going to protect his bride. He's going to make sure they all get out of this not only alive, but with their souls. He's going to make sure that the shepherd loses none of his sheep. So he does use the same words, but he gives them a completely different meaning. Judas comes, and we all are familiar with the Judas kiss and all that. The question is why? The Pharisees and Sadducees had tried to lay hands on Jesus before, and in some very obscure passages we're simply told that Jesus passed on or passed through, or the idea seems to be vanished into the crowd. Apparently Jesus looked like everybody else. There was nothing... look for the 6'5" stacked and packed.
Dude.
Yeah, surfer dude. No, it was. They were afraid that at night, in all the hustle and bustle with so many people there, it would happen again. They wanted to make sure they got the right guy because they screwed this one up before. Thus,
This is actually used in a modern book where the protagonist looks so ordinary that he can't be gotten in trouble for his crimes. It's the Mysterious Benedict Society, which is a charming book.
My daughter, I think, taught that at school this year. After getting rid of
at least
other
one
things.
of your daughters loves that whole series because she was lending me the books and such.
Yes.
It's
I think
so
she
good.
finally got it into school and replaced other classic books that were boring kids to death.
Tell me it was Hans Brinker and the Silver Skates.
I believe it was, actually.
Oh, good. Caddy Woodlawn would have been my next choice.
We already got rid of that one.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
My daughters tend to be iconoclasts in that regard. Although they appreciate classic literature as much as anyone, they also are willing to say, and that book is boring. Let's get something better. Well, switching over to John's gospel now. John tells us something the others don't.
Of course. Typical
Of
John.
course, that's his job. First of all, the question is, what are they doing? What's this crowd doing there? Well, Judas knows that this is where Jesus often goes in the nights to pray or maybe even to camp out. And Judas also, this is John 18, Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus oftentimes resorted thither with his disciples. Probably it belongs to some other disciple that they all know. Perhaps Joseph of Arimathea, because if this is the site of Calvary, he owns the tomb. Judas also, which betrayed him, knew the place, for Jesus often resorted thither with his disciples. Judas, then, having received a band of men and officers, and the words there are, it means Roman soldiers. So the Romans are getting in on the action here. They're being included. It's a nice spread the guilt around kind of ploy. They come from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They come thither with lanterns and torches and weapons. Yeah, like this is going to do anything. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that should come upon him. So at this point, his Father has made clear to him where this is going. Went forth and said unto them, whom seek ye? It's hard to know at which point some of these things happen. It sounds like this may have happened before Judas kissed him. Anyway, Jesus confronts them. Whom do you seek? They answer, Jesus of Nazareth. Okay.
Why, that's me.
And Jesus,
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. Jesus saith unto them, I am. The word he has been supplied by the translators. He speaks the divine name, Yahweh or Jehovah, I am. Judas also, which betrayed them, stood with him. And as soon as he had said that unto them, said, I am ye, they went backward and fell to the ground. So he revealed enough of his divine majesty in those two little words, or one little word probably in Greek, that they all got blasted backward on their backs, onto their behinds. And they get up eventually, or start to, or think about it. And Jesus said, "Whom seek ye?" And he said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Yeah, he answered, "I have told you that I am. If therefore you seek me, let these go their way. That the saying may be fulfilled of which he spoke, of them which thou gavest me, I have lost none." The issue seems to be more than just they're not going to die, because in time, all of these men, except John, will die for the gospel, will die for Jesus. But it may be that more than one of them at that point didn't believe fully, or something's hanging in the balance. Anyway, Jesus is not content to let them die now for their soul's sake and for the church's sake.
Well, and one of the
if you were
things
curious, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, one of the things that David also pointed out in preaching through this is the way in which Jesus is purposeful in being alone in his suffering and his death, because there is no one that can say they contributed to what he did to accomplish for us. So there are ways in which he is purposefully putting them from himself
Very good.
and saving them and protecting them. I mean, even him going forth, it could have been really easy to have them like huddle around him and he could have disappeared really easily, but instead he walks forward. He basically puts himself between his people and the Roman soldiers. And so in all of these things, his concern is always for them. He's praying for them. He's protecting them. He's going on the path for them.
Yeah, it's excellent.
I was just going to add, it is 2 words in the Greek, ego, eimi.
Ego is I, and eimi is I am. So it's I.
The ego is
I
unnecessary. It's emphatic.
It's emphatic, yeah.
Is that where you get the word ego?
Yeah.
Yes.
Ego? Okay. Same one.
Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it, and smote the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. The other Gospels have told us that one of the disciples drew the sword. It said earlier in the upper room that they had 2 swords. Apparently, Peter had one of them, but Matthew and Mark and Luke don't tell us who drew it for whatever reasons. John at this point has always, put himself behind in the shadows. That other disciple, the disciple whom Jesus loved. If he did that, if he didn't name this disciple, everyone would think it was him. And maybe there's something there. I don't know. But he puts his finger on Peter. And a couple things here. First of all, the servant's name is Malchus. John knows the name of the servant of the high priest. John is intimately familiar with the high priest's household, which will explain how he gets Peter into the priestly compound a little bit later, and adds a few other things. But then Jesus said to Peter, remember now in the context of the prayers in Gethsemane, "Put up thy sword into thy sheath. The cup which my Father hath given me, shall I not drink of it?" So there's the third. And this time it's, of course I'm going to drink of it. First it was, is there some other way? Then it's, if there's no other way, then your will be done. And now, of course I'm going to drink of it. This is the path my Father's chosen. And then the chief and the band and the captain of the officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him and led him away to Annas first. Before this is over, Jesus is going to go through 6 trials, 3 Jewish, 3 Roman. The first one is before Annas, and then Caiaphas, and then in the early wee hours of the morning, the whole Sanhedrin, or as much of the Sanhedrin as the conspirators could trust to meet together. And then before Pilate, and then Pilate will send Jesus briefly to Herod, and Herod will send him back. So 6 trials, and it's the 6th day of the week, and the final verdict will be given on the 6th hour. Annas was the father-in-law of Caiaphas. By Jewish tradition, he was, in some measure, the lawful high priest, or at least the one they were used to. But the Romans controlled who got to be high priest, because if you were the high priest, you controlled the temple and you got all the revenue, or at least a substantial part of all the revenue that passed through the temple. In other words, you got rich real fast. And the Romans wanted to control who had that kind of wealth flowing into their pockets. So they generally didn't let anyone stay in that office for more than a year or so. So Annas had been high priest, but they'd removed him. They put his son-in-law Caiaphas there. But Annas is like the legendary spider in the shadows pulling all the strings. He knows about everything. He's the mob boss. He's the godfather. You got to kiss up to him. You got to get his approval. He wants to have the final say on everything. And so before Jesus stands before Caiaphas, who is the high priest according to Roman law, he's going to go stand before Annas. And Peter follows afar off. The other disciples fled, and we've already talked about John Mark being in the garden and running himself. But Peter, I don't know about you ladies, but when I was a little kid, we heard lots of sermons and Bible stories and such, Bible lessons about, yes, Peter followed afar off. But he followed.
I mean, like, there's a strategy to that, right? You're following someone and you don't want to be noticed. You don't stay right on their heels. Just saying.
Yeah.
It's like, not that Peter doesn't have his moments of stupidity. I say this, my maiden name is Peterson, and I always resonated with Peter and his moments of big mouth and all that. But like, I don't think this is one of those moments.
No.
Personally.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was unnecessary.
Is it NCSI? I can never remember.
NCIS.
Thank you. Jethro.
Gibbs.
Gibbs has a list of rules, and one of them is there are two ways to follow somebody: so that you're never seen, or so that you're always seen. I don't know what that means, but it comes back to mind right now. Peter, in any case, picks the following afar off. What we're told just in passing, though, is that, and so did another disciple. This one doesn't say afar off, it just Peter followed, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. Now, at this point, every time there's been this unknown disciple, it's always been John. There's no reason to think it's not John, except the presumption that, well, John was just an ignorant fisherman. How would he know the high priest? Well, one thing is that he has already told us he knows the name of the high priest's servant. We also know that he has a house in Jerusalem, because when he takes Mary away from the cross, he takes her to his house. So apparently his father's fishing business was very profitable and probably provided food for the high priest's table. Anyway, it seems that the high priest, or at least his household, knew John well enough that John was able to, hey, miss, let that guy in. He's with me. And it worked, and nobody questioned it. And what John did, we don't know, because except insofar as we can assume that possibly some of this is eyewitness testimony from John, we're not, he never comes back and tells us what he was doing or anything, but he's there someplace. Peter is in the outer courtyard. Apparently the complex is rather large, with a kind of courtyard in between. Annas has his residence on one end and Caiaphas his on the other. So they're very close to each other. And at this point, I'm simply going to read. Peter stood at the door without. Then went out the other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spake unto her that kept the door, and he brought in Peter. Then saith the damsel that kept the door to Peter, Art not thou also one of this man's disciples? He saith, I am not. And the servants and officers stood there, who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold. And they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself. And so on the one hand, we have Peter in the outer court, and now, perhaps because John went in and saw this, or perhaps because someone there eventually came to Christ, or maybe Jesus himself after his resurrection said, look, guys, some things you need to know that happened while you weren't available. Anyway, this is firsthand testimony of some sort. The high priest asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. He's fishing. He's looking for something because although they had planned this, they had not planned very well. They don't really know what they're going to accuse him of. They just figured, how hard can it be? He ticked us off. Surely there's something there. But they're suddenly realizing we need something that's a capital offense and something we can shove through, even though charging someone with a capital offense and executing the next day is strictly against Jewish law. And we also have to have something that the Romans are going to buy into because we don't have the authority to execute people. That's a Roman thing. Well, how hard can it be to get Jesus tangled up in his talk? Have they not been listening all week? Anyway, he asked, and Jesus says, I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple where the Jews always resort, and in secret I have said nothing. There's no esoteric teaching, no secret knowledge that only the few initiates get to hear. It's a public testimony, a public revelation of his Father. Ask anybody. Everyone knows what I've been saying. Whether they understood it's something else, but there's no secret words. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answerest thou the high priest so? Yes. Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smitest thou me? This trial is full of illegalities from beginning to end. You don't hit somebody who is innocent, who has not been proven guilty according to the laws of God. And yet,
they have to have a second witness.
Yeah.
You can't convict anyone without the second witness, and that's what he's demanding here.
Yeah.
Or suggesting. I don't know if it depends on the tone, whether it was a demand.
But if Jesus has just committed a crime, well, then isn't that what you're looking for? Go on record. Testify that I did something evil, that I broke the law. If not, what's this all about? And we're not told that the man was able to answer him. Now, Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas, the high priest. So when Annas was done with him, and apparently had not got anything out of him that was remotely useful, but at least had played his part as godfather of the situation, he sends him across the compound to Caiaphas. And Peter apparently moves down to that end of things. And Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. They said, therefore, unto him, Art not thou also one of his disciples? And he denied it and said, I am not. One of the servants of the high priest, being the kinsman whose ear Peter cut off, saith, Did not I see thee in the garden with him? Oh, it must have been someone else. Again, notice that John even recognizes not only Malchus, but he recognizes this as Malchus's cousin or nephew or something. I am not. Peter denied again, and immediately the cock crow. Jesus has said, before the cock crows 3 times, she'll deny me. Before the cock crows, she'll deny me 3 times. And we're told, I believe it's in Luke, that at this point, Peter had a visual on Jesus. He was able to see him. And Jesus simply turned and looked at Peter and made eye contact. And I know the message is, I know, I warned you, you weren't ready. I wish I could help you. I'm kind of busy right now. Remember my words, remember my promises. And Peter goes out and weeps bitterly. So going back now to Matthew, and again, if you're going to do any kind of serious study of these passages, you need to have them all open in front of you. You effectively need 4 Bibles or the equivalent of computer software. So you can look at them side by side. They that had laid hold on Jesus, this is Matthew 26, verse 57, led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. Not the whole Sanhedrin. They won't get there till the morning, but enough of them are there to give the things, some kind of air of some kind of legality. Peter followed him afar off into the high priest's palace and went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witnesses against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At last came 2 false witnesses and said, This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. Well, that seems straightforward, except Mark tells us what the other witness said. The other witness said, We heard him say, I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and within 3 days I will build another made without hands. But neither so did their witness agree together. Even when they paid false witnesses, they couldn't get their testimony straight. They remember, this goes all the way back to the early chapters of John, where Jesus had asked, by what authority are you cleansing the temple? He referred to destroy this temple, I'll raise it in 3 days, speaking of the temple of his body. They still remembered that. They just didn't remember it very well. They weren't quite sure what he meant, but there was something in those words that were significant. They were sure of that. They just didn't agree on what exactly he said, so this went nowhere. And so the high priest now is getting desperate and frustrated. Back in Matthew, verse 62, the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witness against thee? It is a good question whether or not Jewish law allows you to compel testimony. You certainly couldn't compel it with torture. Torture's right out. And so presumably Jewish law was along the lines of American law, that if you are accusing somebody, you can't force them to testify against themselves. But this trial is already so illegal, they don't really care. We're already having the judges paying false witnesses. And when Jesus refuses to answer, going as it were as a lamb to the slaughter, as a sheep before her shearers is dumb and opens not his mouth, the high priest answered and said to him, I adjure thee by the living God that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. He puts Jesus under oath. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But this wasn't a willing one. This was an imposed oath. And both the law and the book of Proverbs warns about one who hears the voice of swearing, that is, of the handing down of an oath, and refuses to tell the truth in the wake of such an oath. Now, Jesus probably didn't have to, because they shouldn't be imposing this on the accused person. Nonetheless, he looks at this and, I am not ashamed of who I am. They're asking. Okay. Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said. Which is not, it's very similar to our, you said it. But it's more like, yeah, the words are correct, but you don't know what you're talking. Those words do not mean what you think they mean. Yes, the words are correct. You have no idea what you're dealing with, though. So yes, as far as you understand. As far as I understand what in the world you're talking about. Thou hast said, Nevertheless, I say unto, hereafter, and the Greek word is from now on. From now on you shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. The references to Daniel 7, where one like the Son of Man comes on the clouds to the Ancient of Days and receives a kingdom, power, and glory that all nations should serve him. And so there, Jesus is in effect saying, you sit here presuming to judge me. Well, from here on, you're going to see my judgments as I come in the clouds of wrath against Jerusalem. And notice, you shall see. Not some future generation, not some generation 2,000 years from now or more. You'll all hear. You're going to see me coming in judgment as the reigning king. It's a threat against Jerusalem and the temple and everything wrapped up in the Old Testament economy. All the high priest sees is that he just got what he needs. The high priest rent his clothes, something else that was illegal for him to do, saying, Ye have spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now you've heard this blasphemy. What think you? They answered and said, He's guilty of death, worthy of death. Then did they spit in his face and buffeted him, and others smote him with the palms of the hands, saying, Prophesy to us, thou Christ, who is he that smote thee? And so again, any semblance of order breaks down. Even a condemned man is to be treated with respect. And he's not offering any kind of insult or insolence to the court. He's just standing there, sitting there, probably standing. And they're buffeting him and cursing him and spitting at him. And Peter sat without in the palace. And a damsel came to him saying, and so we're backing up with Peter a little bit, "Thou also was with Jesus of Galilee." But he denied before them all, saying, "I know not what thou sayest." And when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto them that were there, "This fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied with an oath. He swore by Jehovah, "I do not know the man." And after a while came unto him they that stood by and said to Peter, "Surely thou art one of them, for thy speech doth bewrayeth thee." That is, you have a Galilean accent, bud. So you must be with the Galilean in there. Then began he to curse. It doesn't mean he was using four-letter words. It means he was calling down the wrath of God. "The Lord do so to me and more also, if I have ever," while making the appropriate hand gestures across his throat or abdomen or whatever. "I know not the man." Immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which he said to him before the cock crow, "Thou shalt deny me thrice." And he went out and wept bitterly. And when morning was come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. So they've already decided, this skeleton version of the Sanhedrin has decided that Jesus is guilty of blasphemy. That's going to be, as far as they're concerned, the charge. Now, they still are not thinking very well. They should know that that's not going to go anywhere with the Roman governor, especially if he asks for details. But they haven't thought that far. The next step is to get the whole Sanhedrin together. Apparently, at least two people were missing, Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea. But they got together everyone they could trust. And they waited till the sun was peeking over the horizon, because any capital sentence given before sunup was invalid by legal definition. Mm-hmm. So they do it again. They just rush this one through. We've already decided, everyone vote. And they decided as a body to put him to death. And when they'd bound him, they led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate, the governor. And so we come to the end of the Jewish trials, one before Annas, one before Caiaphas, and one before the whole Sanhedrin. And their hatred for Jesus is obvious. Their contempt of the law is obvious. Their desire to preserve their own status and position is obvious. Their envy against Christ is obvious. Even Pilate will figure that one out. What's not obvious is how in the world they're going to get this through a Roman trial.
Yeah, what have they found him guilty of? So far, it's building the temple, the true temple of God, being the sinless Christ, and I think that's it.
Yeah, that's
being the Son of Man promised in Daniel.
Yeah, so it's they have it, and so once they get there, they don't have a slam dunk case, and that's what we will get to pick up with next time and find out how in the world are they going to make this thing work. Yeah, and I'm going to guess we're close enough to a stopping point that we can.
Yep, that's the good point for tonight. So we will pick up here next week. But before we go, let's leave some recommendations for our listeners. I went first last time, so I'm not going to go first this time.
I will recommend, in the light of things that are coming, Josh McDowell's little book, The Resurrection Factor. Now, Josh McDowell is a godly Christian leader who has done a great many good things. He is an evidentialist, which, in case you don't know, means that he relies heavily on evidence, historical evidence, to show that the gospel's interpretation of what happened is the only rational one. There are problems
the historical methods of proof. Not that evidence is wrong, but that the standards that are set up in academia they're not the word of God.
Yeah, they're not the word of God. And a lot of things are easier to say, well, you're giving us a choice of either this or either this incredible coincidence, this incredible thing that could not happen, or the Bible's true. We're going with the impossible because, Sherlock Holmes would ever, when the impossible is ruled out, which would be resurrection from the dead, then whatever's left, somewhere in there's got to be a solution. And so he doesn't come to terms with that as well as he should. Having said that, he's a good, simple writer, very energetic, and he has done his homework. He puts together a lot of the things that went into the trial, that went into what Jesus suffered, and finally into the crucifixion, into his burial, and the historical facts as far as we have them from the Gospels surrounding the resurrection and the testimony of other historical sources later. It is worth reading, even though I think there's a flaw in his method. That does not mean there is not much you can learn from it. And it's a fairly short book with a lot of good historical citations. So Josh McDowell, The Resurrection Factor.
Cool. I'm going to recommend a YouTube channel called The Reformed Mythologist. I know I have referenced Nate Morgan Locke's work before. He did the Popcorn Parenting podcast with James Carey some time ago. A lot of that content has migrated to the Reformed Mythologist channel. But I actually got a shout out from him. He read one of my comments in his videos. I was out at coffee today, and our friend Rebecca sends me a message like, "Did you see this video from Reformed Mythologist?" I'm like, no. And she sends me a timestamp. I'm like, oh no. And he's like, I have a nice little comment here from Emily Maxon about Jane Eyre. And I felt very flattered.
Aww.
Anyway. So Reformed Mythologist, he talks about biblical imagery and stories a lot. I was talking with another one of our friends recently about a Christian conservative commentator who was noting that Disney movies tend to have, or Disney princesses and heroes tend to have dead parents.
Yeah.
And the insinuation was kind of like that this is some kind of anti-family propaganda. And our friend and I were like, maybe that's because our first parents died. Like there might be some reason that the parents are dead in all these stories.
I was actually going to go for another possibility. If the parents are alive, they're going to solve the kid's problem. You can't have the kids going out and adventuring as kids if there are parents there. The parents will send the kids to their room and the parents will go deal with the problem. We talked to David Farshman about this in terms of role-playing scenarios. Why are all of our characters orphans? Because otherwise your parents would be solving this for you. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, I think you have a good point there.
So if for another angle on the whole fairy tale imagery thing, I do recommend Reformed Mythologist because he's got the biblical imagery angle.
Mm-hmm.
Very nice.
We had reached out to him a long time ago to talk about maybe doing a collab about like Beauty and the Beast or something. And then I had a baby and our scheduling was all out of whack. So we never made that happen. But that should not stop anyone from enjoying his channel.
All right.
Very nice. All right. Well, my recommendation is maybe a little more general, which is to think about books that you have read before and reread some of them, particularly novels. Both David and I have been rereading novels that we hadn't read in a while. And it's been long enough that at least for me, I'm reading an Agatha Christie mystery, and I've forgotten enough of it that while I know the solution, I don't know the path there. And so it's very enjoyable to be back in the world with characters that I know, but have not got to, in a sense, visit. He's rereading The Lord of the Rings, which is one everybody I feel should reread every 5 or 10 years, just for...
or every election year.
Yes.
That's my policy going forward.
Yes. So there's a lot of fun going back to stories that you actually already know, because you also find new things in them. So that's my advice or recommendation.
That's a wonderful recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you both so much for this conversation. It's been a delight, as always. A big thank you also to David, our producer, and my lawfully wedded husband. Thank you to our listeners for being here, tuning in, and especially if you support us financially. We really appreciate you keeping the show rolling, getting us that good editing software that makes David's life so much easier. And thank you to anyone who has shared our podcast with someone you know, either in person or on social media. We appreciate that. I said once that we never paid for advertising. Apparently that was not quite true. We'd kicked $10 into Facebook with this one time or something. But that's the scale that we're on with our advertising budget. So yeah, we really appreciate you spreading the word if you enjoy the podcast. And if it's a blessing to you, I hope it will be a blessing to someone else that you know. This is a production of Diecast Media Group. Yeah, we'll see you next time.